You're listening to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Booyah!
Welcome back to the show. I know we have other callers on this 9/11 Remembrance Day. And again, I have just, for my own, I guess my own moral and ethical reasonings, I do want to use today to remind everybody what got us into this problem, and that the best way to remember the deaths of the people who were killed on 9/11 is to never get bogged down in a forever war over resources like oil ever again, and to honor our scientific know-how that will take us out of this stuff and always seek the better in those circumstances. I don't want to hear any arguments about lesser of two evils. If you have a choice between the lesser of two evils, choose less evil. Just as a general rule. And maybe if every time we made the choice, even when we're presented with those of not being like, I'm not going to make a choice, this is just between two, the lesser of two evils, then maybe you're why we didn't take those steps every time to get us closer to this point. Because Steve, our last caller, was right. And again, like even that molten salt tower that we have here in Las Vegas, that technology existed in theory. We just never went through with it because of the expense and because of the worry and because oil was easier, all these other reasons. And transitioning to that might mean that some people go hungry right now, and we don't necessarily want to make that balance, because I don't want, a 1/16 of my constituents to die or not be born because I rolled the dice on a technology that even the scientists that are with me can't say will work. That's why those decisions were made. Yes, we made, monetary, geopolitical, money ones or whatever, but if you make it this kind of like fantastical Rockefeller chomping a cigar decision, this idea that robber barons and capitalists, blah, blah, blah. If you make that fantasy and take the responsibility off the public and what we would want and what we could push for and what we bring the ingenuity around by studying these things, by becoming engineers, by, pushing for these technologies within the sphere of actual knowledge, not a pie in the sky. Somebody should come up with a way that we don't have to use oil anymore. If we're going to abdicate that responsibility and make this fantasy, fat guy chomping a cigar from the Warrant album cover as the bad guy in this circumstance, without recognizing the trade-offs that were done to save lives and to balance the needs of the public against what was possible and where we're going to go, then we're never going to get through these giant changes, and we're always going to get into the forever war kind of situations. We're not going to learn the lessons of yesterday. So this is the generation that has the responsibility. We've given the responsibility to past generations in theory, in sort of a retrospective look back. I find that unfair and unethical on our part. We have the ability to respond. I don't believe they actually had it. If they did, they would have. That's just it.
Pretty much.
Sorry. I know how people want to shake their fist at people who are already dead and think that is a way to pat themselves on the back. No. That's a way of passing the buck. Forget it. Every generation wants to seek the power, the change they want to see in the world. Well, we actually can do it. There was a lot of failed attempts. You talk about the 70s in power, that led to, OPEC and the difference between them, like hostage situations and yada, yada. There were people constantly trying. My father built 2 of the first solar homes in the country in Kentucky, full solar houses in the 70s as an architect. He was the designer. One of them's built into a hillside. And it's kept cool by the earth and then heated in the winter by the insulation provided by the earth and by the solar panels on the outside. In 1976, and they tried and it failed because the solar panels at the time, the technology wasn't quite there yet. They made every attempt. There were valiant people fighting. As much as people make fun of the the old Indian crying by the side of the road ad that everybody's like he was actually an Italian actor and blah, blah, blah. As much as that's kind of a joke now, that made a difference in people littering and polluting streams in the 70s. That shifted things.
It was the Wild West in the 70s.
And
people didn't give an F.
They didn't give a crap. I mean, Steve Martin had a joke about it. Always take a trash bag in your car, and if it ever gets full, you can just chuck it out the window. That was on Let's Get Small, I think. Right? That, and the minute, by the way, I guarantee you could track some level of like people littering again and going back to not giving a crap when people called out that old ad as embarrassing instead of recognizing the value it had and the impact it had socially at the time. And the people at that time who were trying everything they could to stop people from littering and polluting streams and recognizing that because it wasn't just about litter. That was a recognition that we are entwined with our environment. That the message of that was beyond just don't throw your trash out the window. It was, give a hoot, don't pollute was one of the, that was during our childhood as well. Mm-hmm. That was reminding people, that was the seeds of the only reason the person listening to my voice right now, understand our environmental impact. And why, when you hear about climate change, you understand and can grasp the concept is because your parents or the generation before them watched ads on television that said, give a hoot, don't pollute, only you can prevent forest fires, and had a crying Indian getting upset when someone threw trash out their window. Because the purpose of those was not just to deal with the localized problem, but to make people recognize we are entwined with our environment, that we have an impact. You think we have an impact and you understand we have an impact because somebody before you started that conversation. You did not wake up a brilliant person who's aware of climate change because, you just always would have. Because in 1950, you wouldn't have given a crap. If you were born in 1935, you'd have had bigger problems. I'm sorry. I know you think you would have been a social justice warrior, that you would have absolutely been an environmental steward, that you would have, nonsense. Nonsense. So give those people some credit for trying really hard. As people tried to, quell the Industrial Revolution and deal with carbon in their localized environment. Those are the people who planted the seeds of the trees you sit under. Okay? Now it's your turn to plant the seeds that people will sit under in the future. I know I got on a rant, but this drives me crazy because people use it as an excuse to expect that someone will come up with a solution and that somehow people who are alive now are better just 'cause. You're not. You're better because generations before you started to wake up to this issue and tried really hard to jumpstart this movement many, many times. And the same thing is true about gay rights and trans rights and all this stuff. You look back at people and you're like, these people were disgusting, whatever. Nonsense. If you'd have been alive then, you'd have thought the exact same thing. Sorry. You don't get to just because of when you were born magically wake up a better person. It's embarrassing. Stop saying that. Stop saying that if you were alive in the 1800s. It's like the Eddie Murphy bit about slavery in Delirious. If you haven't seen it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Have some humility in the face of this tide. And recognize, too, that you have currently an ability that they did not have. That's why you think it would be easy, because you think you're a swipe right environmentalist now. You can hashtag your way into feeling like you're doing something. And by the way, you can. Because when you hashtag something, you let the general populace know that you're on the team for we can balance this. I'm on the side of renewables. Let's move towards this. I'm really willing to tighten my belt a little bit. So when you do that hashtag stuff, it does matter. It does help. It is valuable. But don't pretend that That's the heavy lifting of working on carbon caps in 1982, when everybody thought you were a lunatic. Or Jimmy Carter putting solar panels on the White House and Ronald Reagan taking them off. By the way, Biden White House, please put them back on. My guess is they're going to do it probably for Earth Day. That would be my guess. I hope that was your chair squeaking, Johnny. This matters. I ran straight through that break. We'll take a couple of calls in our last little segment on our way back. So you're listening to the House Sparks radio program, Mega World Rant. I'll be back right after this.